Welcome to Daredevil and the Details, a show that explores and dotes on the philosophy and the themes of Netflix's Daredevil, a digression collection brought to you by Method to the Madness and ZeroIndent. I'm author DC McNeil, and I'm joined, as always, by Patrick from A Method to the Madness. Pat, it's another fine Sunday evening. It's another fine Sunday evening for talking about all things Daredevil, talking about... Yeah, and for a bit of behind baseball, this is after we've recorded our season 1 finale, technically, or our bonus recording.
The continuity is all out of whack. I don't understand how this movie fits into this episode.
It's confusing. I don't get it. Yeah. Well, it's the Daredevil and the Detail extended cinematic universe. Pat, keep up. You have to. You know, there's a release order and there's a watch order.
Yeah, I'm not up to date. Okay, that makes sense.
That's really on you at a certain point.
It is.
Okay, so today, episode 5 of our show, we're covering episodes 11 and 12 of Daredevil. These are like the penultimate episodes before the finale. These are really plot heavy. I'm not sure like what other word to use. And so for that reason, I don't have like a tremendous amount to say necessarily. So maybe a bit of a shorter one. What did you think, sort of working through these 2 episodes at a high level?
Thought the same thing, especially the second episode is like all about, plot, process, investigation. Matt learns a clue, goes to Clue's place, discovers things that would progress the plot. Yeah, not too heavy on the philosophy, although there is some interesting lines here and there. There's more religious themes, which I absolutely love.
Big fans. Yep.
Yeah, big fan of that. It's all setting up for a really, really, really cool finale, though. So it's all good. Yeah, man. It's all gravy.
It feels a little bit like it feels like they kind of were like, oh shit, we kind of need to move things into place. Okay, we could do this. That's the feeling of like the writers' room of like, okay, you guys do that, I'll do this, and then by the time we're ready for the finale, it'll all be here. Like it's, it's very good. I'm interested. So the way that we're going to do this is obviously, so we'll this episode we're covering these 2. Then we'll have our kind of finale of season 1. Then we'll publish our bonus, and then we'll get into season 2. I'm interested because you've revisited the subsequent seasons of material more recently than I have. I'm interested how you feel this fits into like the overall like arch plot with Daredevil, because obviously it's like, hey, he's got the suit now and he's an established hero. What do you think these 2 episodes, or I guess leading into the finale, how do you think this positions us for next season? Like if there's something we should be thinking about philosophically or something we should be thinking about thematically as we head into the finale, what do you think that is?
Prepares us philosophically. I don't know about that. There's some like kind of superficial plot things that it prepares us for. Like obviously him getting the suit, and then there's just like random stuff like Gal having these superpowers. Obviously that's not like a Daredevil thing, that's like a Defenders thing. There was some other things that I'm like, oh, this is like kind of interesting in retrospect.
There's some stuff Claire and Matt talk about that's really interesting for like Matt's life in general. Like she kind of has this we'll talk about it when we get to it, but she sort of basically is like, if you do this, you are going to end up alone.
Right.
Which I feel is definitely a big plot thing in season 2 with Elektra and Karen, and Matt's involvement there.
Yeah. It's kind of like just very on the nose foreshadowing for season 3 as well, when he actually does do the things that he's scared to do. Or,
that's true. Sorry,
I phrased that really badly. He's afraid of pushing people away because he knows that is ultimately, something that's not going to work out for him, for his soul. But and then as is the tenet is in storytelling, like you got to actually do the thing that the character is afraid will happen to them. So some cool foreshadowing in that regard, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely kind of clawing to hold on to. I mean, these are really interesting episodes because I feel like it's the first time, it's the first time and this sort of persists where like the thing that the comics do is like it's Foggy, it's Matt, and it's Karen, and this is the show really diverging in a pretty significant way from like the dynamic of what that looks like, and seeming to understand that like these characters are most interesting together when their relationship isn't going well.
Yeah.
which is, I mean, unfortunate for these characters, but it is the story, as it were.
You wouldn't want to have an author as a god, hey? Like, you know your life's just going to get fucked up, yeah.
I don't even know if I want to have, like... I've got enough author friends that I'm like, I don't even know if I want to know more authors at this point. You know? Like, I might have hit my capacity. A bunch of weird, sad guys. Okay, well, first episode is episode 11, The Path of the Righteous. This was written, of course, by the one true pairing, Bill Everett and Drew Goddard, and directed by Nick Gomez. Pat, could we please hear the summary?
Licking his wounds in the aftermath of Fisk's beating, Matt is visited by Karen. She shares the news of Fisk's patricide as a 12-year-old boy, but Matt shrugs off her pleas. Later, Claire visits to continue patching up Matt, and after a charged exchange, she leaves, suggesting Matt obtain some kind of body armor, or considering acquiring a coffin. Meanwhile, Fisk tends to Vanessa in hospital. Leland badgers Wesley, who sends Leland away to confirm if Gal was the poisoner. While Foggy drowns his sorrows in his Marcy in whiskey, Urich agrees with Matt's view that the information of Fisk's patricide is shaky, not the silver bullet Karen hoped for. The Man in Black visits Melvin Potter, the tailor who made Fisk's suits, and requests that Potter make him a symbol. Wesley reaches out to Fisk's mother and learns of Karen and Ben's visit. Deciding to spare Fisk the trouble, Wesley kidnaps Karen and confronts her. Wesley explains his worldview, and when his phone rings, Karen snatches up the pistol and shoots him 4 times in the chest. Actually, I think it was 5 times.
Well, I'm sorry. That's a continuity error in Daredevil and the Details. I apologize. I thought it was pretty close. I literally, like, as I finished the episode, I was like, oh, that sounds right. I didn't fact check. I apologize.
Actually, I might be wrong. I don't know.
You might have gone out on a limb and been incorrect.
Yeah, I feel like it was 5.
This episode's an absolute banger.
This episode is actually really good, yeah.
It's really like, it's a bunch of things coming together in a way that the whole season has been like setting up. And I mean, there's a bunch of stuff in here that I think is really interesting. I think the chief among which is like, it starts with Karen visiting Matt, and Matt just like, he is not in a good place at the moment. It's like 10 in the morning and she comes in and he's like, do you want a drink? And she's like, no. It's a bit early for beer. And he's like, depends on the day you're having. And he just like lies to her face and like evades all her questions. And then she gives him like some of the most surreal imagery we've seen in the show so far, where she gives him a get well soon balloon, which he can't see. And it's like,
yeah.
It's equal parts absurd and touching, and like the shot ends with Matt sitting on the arm of the couch and just this balloon dangle. I was so struck by that, and I genuinely don't know why.
Yeah, I know. I don't know what to make of that either. Like, it's just kind of, I don't know. There's just these little like esoteric moments in the show, in the show, just sprinkled throughout.
Yeah.
And I know I'm kind of hesitant to ascribe much meaning to it, but I'm always like, oh, let's see what David has to say about it.
I think it's one of those things of like, if you have characters that are interesting and make not incorrect but make weird choices for weird reasons, I think it's one of those moments where Karen does this without quite. I think before she enters the room and before she has the conversation with Matt and finds him in the state and the mental state he's in, this might have been kind of a funny, cute thing to do. And it, because of the way that the scene turns, it becomes an absurd image, even though her intention is still preserved.
Yeah. And what are you going to do? Just not give Matt the balloon that you bought?
The balloon that you... Like, it's so like... And it's like, well, he can't see it. Like, that would have been funny otherwise. But here you just go, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very cool... It also gives... I mean, if we're being as facile as possible, it's the excuse that she has invented to go and see him. which is like
Right.
get well soon balloon. Obviously that's not why she's there, and we know that, but that's kind of her logical reason to be there, I guess.
Yeah.
No, yeah, I thought that was a really good scene. What do you think about... So a big part of this episode, or not necessarily screen time, but like conceptually, is devoted to Wesley kind of handling everyone around Fisk while Vanessa's in hospital. What's your kind of... Yeah, there's this... something I noted down here is, in thinking about this as the religious epic, there is this way in which Wesley and Leland kind of speculating about who poisoned Vanessa, and potentially tried to kill Fisk. It's sort of like from the Bible, when the apostles kind of behind Christ's back discuss his virtue and whether or not they believe that he is in fact the Son of God, and whether they believe what he's doing is wrong or not. And these, like, Leland knows it's the wrong thing to do to talk about this effectively within, you know, a stone's throw of Fisk, but is doing it for his own ends. What do you think about this kind of as like this? It's like a load-bearing concept in the episode, which is the relationship between Wesley and Leland, and then Leland and Gow, of course, in the reveal we get kind of who did do the poisoning.
I didn't know about that that detail about the apostles talking about Christ. That's interesting. Okay. I mean, I don't know. I didn't really think much of it. I thought what was more interesting was just like the continual exploration of the relationship between Wesley and Fisk, how it's this master-servant relationship. And it's like, man, what the fuck? Like, I mean...
This dude will say and do anything.
Yeah, I don't know. It really... there's a bit where Fisk is like, I want to... Because they're talking about, you know, he's like, oh, you got to find whoever did this. I want to look in their eyes when I salt the earth with their blood.
Oh, yo, it's such a good line.
Yeah, and then he's talking about sending Vanessa away, and then he says, Wesley says, oh, I don't think she'll like that. And then he says, well, we seldom get everything we want in this world. And then
yeah.
And then Wesley looks at Fisk and goes, well, some of us deserve to.
It's like, it's such poetry. Like, it's so good.
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to place exactly like what kind of archetype this is, because like it seems familiar, you know, like that obsequious sort of relationship. But Wesley isn't that at all. Like he's a very capable, very sort of I don't know. Like he seems to have like a lot of conviction, a lot of like individuality. But he's sort of like parasitic in his relationship with Fisk. Like he defines his own value through Fisk.
I think a big part of that is because he has this breadth and depth of things you don't expect him to be able to do or think about or have done. Like he's this very learned man in a way that I don't think you would often see in this archetype. You might kind of you might think similarly of I'm trying to think of like the equivalent of like a villain, but like a Harley Quinn, for example. You know, while she has like while she's a doctor and has studied extensively, doesn't come across as particularly philosophical in her education. Like doesn't necessarily have that. I think what makes Wesley so interesting is if he wanted to be, it seems like he could be. He even says at one point, he's like, I don't even like this city. You know, I'm here for him. It seems like he could go away elsewhere and really make something of himself. But there's an aspect to him that sort of fits into this role quite easily and quite comfortably. And that's what makes him so compelling.
Yeah, and you know, it's probably directly related to what Fisk inspires, because he's such he has like such a strong conviction he has such a strong conviction that's paired with like an earnest evil in him, that essentially he's inspired like followers, like really powerful followers, which is like a really cool trope in hero villain stories, where the villain is like this uber powerful people that he inspires this great loyalty from other powerful people.
Yeah, it's different than like the Joker inspiring a bunch of dipshits to follow him. Like there's the fact that he's able to have all of these allies in the first instance proves to us his authenticity as this kingpin, as it were.
Yeah, like I love that scene when he's I think he's talking at Vanessa when she's unconscious.
Mm-hmm.
He's talking about like, I'm not a religious man. I tried to learn. I don't know how to pray. I've seen it in movies, and I tried to imitate it, but it was false.
It's such a good line.
I love the language he uses as well.
It has like a what does he say? He talks about he sort of places himself contiguous to Matt, who is struggling with his faith but hasn't lost it, and he is someone who can't pray because he never believed. And there's this like dyadic relationship where Matt doesn't want to believe but he can't quite help it, and Fisk wants to believe but can't quite get there, and they're sort of in opposition in that regard. And I quite like the idea of the prayers being imitations but nonetheless still representing the same like kind of ritualistic power.
Yeah,
it's a very specific sort of character. He even says at one point, he's talking about it's just before he says, you need to find out who did this. I want to look in their eyes and salt the earth with their blood. He's saying, he's quoting Gao, and he's saying, Gao came up to me and she said, when he's talking about fate, and he says, I have to choose a path or fate will choose for me. And what he means is that if I don't act, someone will act on my behalf. He doesn't mean fate. Like, he means Gao. He's sort of repeating that threat to Wesley in order to get Wesley to get Leland to go and check on Gao. Like it's this, he never quite says directly things to Wesley because he doesn't need to. Wesley picks up on so much of the implication or the intention behind what he's saying that there's a I think that's why their relationship's so cool to watch, is like Wesley anticipates seemingly his every need. And it feels like only Wesley could do that because of his education and his loyalty and all of those things combined.
Yeah, and that's why Wilson values him so much, but as a servant, like as a like it's, I don't know, it's so weird and interesting. Yeah,
he's not an equal, but he's respected, and there's a big difference between those two. Yeah, it's pretty compelling as like a concept for this late in the season. I think the other thing, the other conversation we get that I thought was really marked as far as like the story that we're seeing is Claire and Matt have the like Batman conversation this episode, where she's like, it's like the conversation from The Dark Knight, where she's like, as much as the city needs Daredevil, I don't think there'll be a day when you don't need Daredevil.
Right.
And you get her really putting her finger on the kind of pulse of like, and Matt even says to Father Lantom at one point, I think it's this episode or the previous one, he's like, why did God put the devil in me? Like he feels this compulsion to do this violence, and that's Claire really pointedly being like, until you can get over that, we're quits, buddy.
Yeah, there's a lot of emphasis on nature in this episode. At the nature of people, how they can't escape it, and they try to do different things. They try to pray, and they find that it's a false. And Matt tries to not succumb to his violent nature, but he finds reasons to. As Claire says, there's always going to be something or someone, and again with the Batman parallels, she says something like, I think you're the man the city created. It's like I don't know, putting people secondary to forces of nature almost.
Yeah, or imagining people as being driven by forces that are outside of their control in some way. Like the idea of nature as being like inescapable. I mean, you get that with Karen discovering Fisk killing his father. Like, she goes, but it's proof that he is inherent, like his nature is inherently evil. And Matt going, well, that doesn't matter because people don't think like that. And Ben kind of saying the same thing and eventually giving in. Like, it's sort of a people avoiding or obfuscating the truth, which is like people can't escape their nature. And that's kind of like, that's the dilemma here, is like if you're honest about it, people don't care because they think they can escape their own nature. And that's kind of why it would never stick, because people go, oh, well, he did that when he was 10, but he's obviously a different person now. Because people don't want to believe that they're fundamentally trapped within their own.
Yeah. That is interesting. I didn't consider that Karen's argument is Karen's argument is pretty much like, we got to reveal that Fisk killed his dad when he was a kid to prove his nature, basically, like to prove that he's sort of evil at his core. And you know, as Foggy and as everyone tells Karen, like, that there's no legal course that you can take that information through, but the point is that to reveal his nature, essentially.
I guess that speaks to Karen's nature as well, in that she is so, at an elemental level, she is so bent on this course of making things right, that she can't conceive of anyone not sharing her view. To the point where she pushes Ben to eventually get himself killed. Which is the same thing Matt is doing, they just use different means. And that's kind of why they work so well together, as shared protagonists of this season, I think. There's also a line that Claire says, I think, that I just want to not skip over, which is she says, the martyrs and the saints, the saviors, they all ended up the same way, bloody and alone. And that was the line that I was kind of alluding to there earlier, where you get her really staking down, this is what's going to happen, and of course the show has the balls to actually do it, and commit to that. And look, and it says, look at what happens. And it's not pretty. Obviously with season 3, it's not, Matt is not doing well with that outcome.
Yeah. I also like there's a line from Father Lantern where he says, most people aren't afraid of dying when it comes right down to it. It's living that scares the crap out of them.
Yo, can we talk about how good he is this season?
Father Lantern?
This episode in particular, he's just... Yeah. He has... There's a line that he says, and as I've been writing this game I've been working on, one of the biggest challenges is, like, if you walk up to someone and talk to them, they have to say something that is, like, character setting and flavorful. Like, you need them to say something that, like, makes them stick in your brain. And Father Lantern has this line here, which just, I was spinning. He goes, quote, I've had 4 cups today, decaf, but there's still a little bit of caffeine they can't get out. Some things are just too ingrained, I guess. And, like, that sentence has more characterization than some entire novels and entire characters and stories. Like, he is such a... It's just brilliant. And it's like, he's indirectly commenting on the themes of the season, but it also sounds like a thing he would say, and it tells you a lot about his worldview. I was floored by how... just that like, how sharp that piece of dialogue is. It's brilliant.
You know, in a perfect world, all characters would speak in, like, these really dense, poetic ways.
If I were running things.
Yeah.
If we were in charge. Yeah, it's so good. He then goes on to talk about this, which is... do you recall where he gives his pitch for the devil and, like, where he thinks it comes from? Because Matt sort of says... This is the other big thematic thing here, is Matt goes, you know, like, why did God put the devil in me? Like, why am I like this?
Yeah.
And he continues, Father Lantern continues on his thesis about the devil that we saw a few episodes ago, and he says, quote, nothing drives people to church faster than the devil snapping at their heels. Maybe that's why God created him in the first place, allowed him to fall from heaven, to create a symbol to be feared, a warning to us all to tread the path of the righteous. Which is, of course, the title of the episode. They said the thing. I've written down on my notes. He said the thing. Which this Father Lantom has this conceit the entire time, which is like the church created the devil in order to have a protagonist, but he's like, but ultimately it isn't that simple. The devil's always existed. Like his argument seems to be, they have taken something innate in the metaphysical world. I was going to say world, but like in the metaphysics of their belief about the world. They've taken something that has always existed and bent it to their will, like their structural need. And he's sort of arguing like, well, the devil is innate. Like the devil that's in Matt is innate in the same way that the devil inside Fisk is fundamentally innate. And it's simply, it's a symbol to be feared because it reminds us to tread the path of the righteous, which is ultimately what Matt ends up becoming when he has the symbol that's forged for him. That's why when Matt goes to Potter, he says, "I want a symbol." Like it's that speech which seems to plant the idea in Matt's head finally of like, the devil is who I need to become.
I like how it's like a revelation for Matt. How it's like, in order to tread a path of good and of being moral, you need to reconcile those two parts of you, that Matt feels, of the devil and of the desire to be good, essentially. And like he's like, they don't have to, they can coexist. And because of the explanation that Father Lantom gives of how, the fact that you feel the devil in you drives you to be good, essentially. I like how he uses Christian symbolism as, it's kind of like just a one-to-one with like the philosophy of morality, pretty much. Like it's very evocative and useful.
That's useful is the word that I think really is like where I think this is different from a lot of other a lot of other like perhaps like real life representations and deployments of religion and faith like this. Like Lantom is far more interested in the utility of these things as like, and I say this directly and I mean it, as direct parables, right? He's telling you a parable because it relates to something that you're working through, or he doesn't tell a parable, he will create one as he's speaking to you. He will find a way to poeticize your challenge to help you gain a new perspective. It just so happens to be the Catholic faith is the thing he's using. He could be using sports car metaphors and it would still be the same mechanism, right? Like the Catholicism isn't the thing, it just happens to be the framing device, if that makes sense.
He's a storyteller.
Yeah. Well, he's a philosopher, he's a teacher.
Yeah. I ideally, like, that is, I wish like all religious people were like that, like that'd be great. I'd go to church.
Same.
I'd tell them my problems and he'd process it and spit it back out to me in this really cool, like, poetic way, and I'd be like, oh fuck yeah, dude.
Instead of just about that. Instead of just being like, I don't know, have faith or whatever. Yeah, it's I'll probably play the whole monologue at some point in our discussion there because I think it's just like absolutely sensational. But
maybe you're being called to summon the better angels of your nature. Maybe that's the struggle you're feeling deep within you.
And how do you know the angels and the devil inside me aren't the same thing?
I don't. But nothing drives people to the church faster than the thought of the devil snapping at their heels. Maybe that was God's plan all along. Why he created him. Allowed him to fall from grace. To become a symbol to be feared. Warning to us all. To tread the path of the righteous.
You know how the episode opens on like a cartoon playing?
Yeah.
Do you think that has any significance?
Remind me of the context.
It's like a Tom and Jerry kind of cartoon,
and that's
this kid is watching it.
It then pans out and it's the drug den or whatever. Is that right?
No. It's when they're wheeling Vanessa, or they're carrying Vanessa into the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't know. It's a cool kind of interesting opening shot.
I think it's the contrasts the absurdity again.
The only reason it sort of caught my attention is because this is kind of weird, but at the beginning of the second John Wick movie, the opening shot is there is a projection of a Buster Keaton movie playing on the side of a building, and then it pans down, and then it's like a motorcycle chase. And that the parallel there is that like the John Wick is the new form of physical comedy, like it was in it's the equivalent of the 1930s Buster Keaton stuff. So ever since then, I see these similar things, and I'm like, oh, is there some sort of not quite one-to-one parallel I'm not seeing here? But I don't know. Honestly, I don't know.
I mean, I can pull it out of my ass if you want. I think the obvious thing there is like, you know, cartoons were the way that we used to like learn about the world and learn lessons about like right and wrong. And this show is kind of casting aspersion on that and saying, actually, really to learn about right or wrong is a lot more complicated, and there isn't necessarily a right or wrong. I think it's contrasting the morality of how simple that is, where it's like, don't hurt other people, and like I mean the you know, all the basic kind of like childhood things that you learn about, like, well, this is a lesson that's important. And Daredevil is really like the evolution of that, where it's like, well, actually, here's how to really think about this stuff. And so in
postmodern take, baby.
Oh, exactly, yeah. And so like in the same way that the Buster Keaton versus John Wick, I think it's like cartoon ethics and morals versus like real ethics and morals, you know.
Okay, I like it.
That's my 30-second constructed argument. Don't at me about it.
I mean, I find it interesting that Ben is angry at Karen for deceiving him and dragging him into this precarious position, right? And because it comes at such a pivotal section in Ben's arc when he's made this very personal decision to decide what's important in his life. You know, he's going to stop pursuing dangerous people because he wants to protect his wife. And I mean, you know, I'm not absolutely not going to like call Karen like selfish or anything like that. But it is interesting just how complicit she is in like kind of absolutely like, you know, destroying this man's life. Like,
yeah, it's I mean, I said it very early on, but like she gets him killed pretty early.
Yeah.
But it's what you were saying before about nature. Like, it's just she reminds him that he can't escape who he is.
Yeah, and that's sort of the it doesn't take away any agency from Ben, I think, because at the end of the next episode, his wife pretty much gives him that speech of like, well, you're gonna do it anyway because that's what you actually want to do. She's like, you're Ben
Urich, this is what you do.
Yeah, and he's like, oh damn, she's right. I just love the line when she's calling Ben. She says, "Oh, it's all falling apart," and then he goes, "Well, that's how you know it's at the point of the story when it's getting interesting."
What a great meta comment.
Yeah.
What a like. I love it when the story talks to you about the story and you don't realize, and you're like, "Oh yeah, that is what's happening."
I also think it's interesting in hindsight about when you learn about Karen's relationship with her dad in season 3, and she calls Foggy and Matt don't want anything to do with her at this point, and so the only person she has left to talk to is Ben, who's kind of a father figure.
Yeah.
So yeah, I thought that was kind of interesting.
I did note that down, which is like Karen. She's so isolated. I've written down at the end of this episode, Karen is in a position where Ben is the only person she can rely on. Because Matt's out of action and Foggy's in this like self-pity spiral. And like Karen throughout the show is going to remain really possessed of her. Like Karen is a protagonist in a different story that's also happening while we're watching Daredevil. You could imagine a B show where it's all of the excise scenes of Karen's life as she goes about all this without the boys, like, and they're side characters in her story. And I think that speaks to this, where like this is her at her lowest because she's relying on this father figure, makes the worst decision possible. That's the only option she has. And then her decisions prior to this have led to an outcome where Ben ends up getting killed. Like, she kind of, when she needs him the most, her previous actions and her nature have meant that she has left us. She has necessarily put herself in a position where she's alone.
Yeah.
And that's such a, like, it's a lot of moving parts, even to describe it like that. But that is kind of what's happening here. She is the cause of her own isolation, and yet the agent that can change it. Okay, we should talk about the ending then.
All right.
Because I think this is a pretty big turning point in the plot and the potential for where the show is going. So Wesley kidnaps Karen because he realizes that she had visited Fisk's mother. And he has this great little monologue that I'm probably just going to play in full. And, you know, he talks about, he has this line where he says, and I thought this was like it tells you so much about Wesley. He says, quote,
"Do you love this city?"
What?
It's a simple question. Do you love this city?
I haven't been here long enough.
Huh. I find a few days, a week at most, is ample time to form an emotional response. Growing to love something is really simply forgetting slowly what you dislike about it. I'll be perfectly honest, the situation calls for it. I do not love this city. The crush of the unwashed garbage stacked on the sidewalk, the air that seems to adhere to your skin, a layer of filth you can never completely wash away.
Maybe you should move.
I'm not here because I want to be. I'm here because I'm needed.
By Fisk?
He loves this city in a way you and I never could. I don't expect you to understand that. There are moments when even I struggle to, but he does very deeply. Almost, I suspect, as much as he loves his mother.
growing to love something is really simply slowly forgetting all the things you dislike about it. And I was like, that's the most like pragmatic, saddest, nihilistic Wesley thing of anyone ever to say.
Yeah.
It's such a rich
I mean,
characterization.
and it's also kind of true, like in,
It is.
in some things, like
Yeah, well, like that's a big part of it. It's like, what do they say? You know, most of any long-term relationship is compromise, right? Finding the
Right. places
places where you can compromise, and if those compromises work together, then you know you can maintain that relationship without much tension. And he goes from that to then kind of speaking about Fisk. He talks about like spreading the good news when he's trying to get her to turncoat and be on his side.
Right.
And he's explicitly drawing on obviously like religious language and imagery, which is the first time we've seen him do that, I think.
yeah.
It's pretty good. He's like, you're really scumming up things, and let me give you an offer, which is, you know, you go spread the good news, you go tell the gospel, and nothing bad needs to happen to you and your friends.
Yeah.
And then he has this big threat where he's like, I won't. She's like, well, just kill me. He's like, no. I'm gonna find your family and kill your family, and then when that's done, I'm gonna find Ben and kill him and his wife, and then I'm gonna find your little lawyer friends and I'm gonna kill them. And then finally, and I almost expected him to be like, and then you have my permission to die. But he doesn't. But it's pretty similar, where he's like, you know, watch your entire world burn, and then you can die. It's pretty metal. It's metal as fuck, frankly. Yeah.
I also love the way he delivers that line where he goes, you know, if Fisk found out you visited his mother, he would be extremely disturbed.
The acting, it's so good.
Yeah.
What do you make of and I don't want to spoil anything for people, so I'm gonna ask you this. So I mean at a thematic level, not at a plot level. What do you make of Karen saying, do you really think, because she has the gun and he's like, to set it up for folks who haven't seen it. So they have this heated exchange and he leaves a pistol in front of him. And it's Wesley being Wesley, where it's him trying to intimidate her. And she's like, there'll be a moment where I'll take it. And he's like, okay. And his phone rings. It's Fisk calling him. And she grabs the gun and points it at him. And he's like, do you really think I'd leave a loaded gun on the table where you could reach it? She's like, fucking try me, bro. And she says, do you really think this is the first time I've shot someone? And I have forgotten a lot of season 3 and season 2. And so I went, shit, is it? And I like that for me was a real moment of characterization where I was like, whoa, Karen continues to be the most interesting character in this show. Like, I was like, what does that mean? Because I genuinely don't remember, but like, what do you make of that? Obviously, aside from trying to, keep Wesley on his toes.
Yeah, it's an interesting bit of characterization. She's just got like so many secrets.
Yeah.
For someone who's all about the truth, it's interesting how she has so many secrets.
Yeah, it's that it's almost like all these characters are contradictions, and that's what makes them feel real.
It's like that is what that's what dimensions are in characters.
Yeah, it's the conflict between want and need, right? Where it's like she wants to tell the truth. Sorry, she wants to go and do all these things while protecting herself and her truth, but she needs to be honest. And it's like those are the listen, I can't explain to you screenwriting, all right? You gotta go take a writing 101 course, you'll get it. Or listen to the 10 years of the show we did. But yeah, it's I really like this dynamic, and I like the fact that what does he do? Does he go to get up and she shoots him? I can't remember the exact sequencing, but it's something like that, right?
It's clear, like Wesley's thinking like, okay, I got to play this like perfectly. I got to not show like an inch of hesitation. So he sort of adjusts his glasses and he goes to stand up. Honestly, like that's probably the best thing he could have done. Like just play it off as like as if he knows that there's no bullets in that gun.
Yes.
And then Karen shoots him.
And she just shoots him several times. 5 apparently, according to Pat. He's staking his reputation.
Don't quote me.
He's staking his
Unless
reputation, folks. He said to me off recording, if there aren't 5 shots in that gun that she shoots him with, then he will hand in his media literacy card. That's what he said to me first. So.
my podcast license.
Yeah.
I get disbarred. Yeah,
exactly right. This is a stone cold ass way to end an episode, by the way. We haven't really talked about it before, but like this show doesn't really do plot cliffhangers. It does like feelings cliffhangers. Very similar to like Breaking Bad in that way, where it's like it leaves you with a big emotional like ka-dunk, and then you just sit in your own filth and go, fuck, damn, that's heavy.
Sit in your own filth.
Yeah.
Ew.
You just sit there, or like you're on like mental filth. Where you just sit there and you're like,
yeah.
Like, I didn't mean literally. We can shower. You're allowed to shower. All right. A really, really good episode. Yeah, probably like the second episode that we're about to talk about is like a lot more plotty plot. Is there anything else you want to cover before we take a quick break and then kind of round out this penultimate episode?
No, that's all I had.
All right, well, we'll be right back after this brief intermission, and we'll be talking about episode 12. So we'll, for you guys, it will be very few seconds. For us, potentially slightly longer. We'll be right back.
Do you really think I would put a loaded gun on the table where you could reach it?
I don't know. Do you really think this is the first time I've shot someone?
This page.
We're going to talk about the penultimate episode of the season, episode 12, The Ones We Leave Behind, written, of course, by the one true pairing, Bill Everett and Drew Goddard, and directed once again by Eurus Lynn. Pat, could we hear the summary, please?
It's a short one this time. Karen struggles in the wake of Wesley's death. Matt tracks down Gal's heroin to a warehouse. He dismantles the operation and confronts Gal. In the aftermath, Gal explains to Leland she's returning to her homeland. Meanwhile, Fisk's men find Wesley's body. Fisk realizes the last person Wesley spoke with was his mother. She's unable to recall what she and Wesley spoke about before his death, but nonetheless, Fisk sends her to Italy for safety. Foggy takes what they know to Marcy, insisting on her help. Meanwhile, Ben writes the Fisk story and is fired from the paper. He decides to publish it online, but before he can do so, Fisk strangles Urich to death in his own home. End of episode.
As I said, very plotty. Like, there's sort of, it's very like, thing happened, then thing happened, then thing happened. And I think that's why it has such a brisk pace to me. I feel like I blinked and this episode was over. Not in a bad way, just like, it moves at a clip.
Yeah. There is one sort of like overarching thing that I think ties this episode together really nicely, which is that it's interesting how Fisk would have never known who visited his mother if Karen hadn't pushed Ben to publish the story, which then leads to the confrontation in the office with Ellison, and that snitch overhears it and then reports it to Fisk. Yeah. It's
a really clever sort of, it's the jigsaw puzzle fitting into place, isn't it? We sometimes talk about one of the ways that you want a story to feel is that the way that events play out, particularly in these moments as you lead up to the finale, is that all the pieces fall into place and you're surprised at how they fall into place. But as you reflect on it, you realize things couldn't have gone any other way. Like there's inevitability to it, which makes it feel real. And this episode is like, it's like the inevitable conclusion of all of these choices so far, particularly for Karen. I adore and am haunted by the way that the episode opens, where it's all about Karen really struggling to deal with what's happened, right? With what she's done. You know, she goes down and just like chokes down whiskey and then collapses into this like grief. She has this nightmare / night terror of like Fisk coming in and you know, strangling her and trying to kill her. And I'm left with this question thinking about this opening, which is like, you know, she said that this isn't the first person she shot. And if that's the case and that wasn't just a bluff, what makes this so different? And is it the looming sense of impending doom? The fact that like he has the ability to enact retribution? And then also, what does this mean for her placed next to Matt, who is struggling against whether or not he should kill Fisk, given she's just killed his right-hand man? Like, these thematic pieces are kind of waxing and waning into focus in these little sequences here, and I think it's like, it's absolutely brilliant storytelling.
It's such a huge, like, bold decision for a show that is so enthusiastic and intent on exploring the morality of killing in general. Just like killing one person like condemns your soul, and then to have like one of the main characters actually kill someone, like, it's really good, but I just would not have expected it from a show that is so focused on the Batman philosophy, you know. I love it. It's like it goes there.
Well, not only does it go there, but like Karen killing Wesley is self-defense, sort of.
Yeah.
It's not self-defense enough for her to be absolved, and that's the tricky line they managed to walk. Like, she does it because it needs to be done, but also because it's self-defense. If Matt does it, it's just murder. Like,
Yeah.
it's an assassin. If Matt does it, it's an assassination. This moment for Karen of killing Wesley is a regrettable outcome of the decision she's made. Like, yes, she gets Wesley and Ben killed. I'm not denying that her actions didn't cause that, but that wasn't her intent. And I think that's where, like, the morality thing that Lantham is always talking about is present here, which is like, what's the intention? Like, what are you trying to achieve? Is Matt just like indulging in his need for violence, and that the killing is the next step in that indulgence? And that's very different than Karen shooting Wesley in this moment, I think. And that's kind of why it's so compelling, is that it manages to go there without undermining the whole question of the show, really.
Yeah. And it kind of widens the scope of the themes as well, because Karen's priorities are like so different from Matt's, and it fits her story really well that she did go through this. And yeah, as you said, like, it doesn't make the themes like meander or anything. It doesn't contradict anything. It just sort of I don't know, embellishes it, really.
Yeah, and I think that's a really hard line to walk, because you could imagine this undermining what they're going for. And yeah, you're right. It just emboldens everything. It makes you really go, is there it makes you go, did she do the right thing? Probably. But also, is there a version of reality where Matt could kill Fisk and it be the right thing? Like, it suddenly injects that question into this equation. Yeah, it's a really bold swing, and they completely pull it off. It's impressive. I've written down here that Foggy talking about weed sounds like me talking about weed, which is very funny.
Smoked a doobie once.
It's just him being like, the doobies and the blunts, man. Just fucking clueless. It's great.
I also like how he says it made him drool. Like, that is totally what weed would do to Foggy.
It's so Foggy, yeah.
He would just get the munchies, probably, and just like...
Oh, 100%,
you know,
yeah.
Yeah.
And he'd never do it again, but you'd be like, oh, but it was really funny. Could you do it again for us? It's good stuff. Oh boy. Okay. Two other things I want to talk about, and then, I mean, I don't really have a lot in this episode aside from the revelation about who poisoned Vanessa. Fisk beating the shit out of the lackey who just happens to be next to him when he finds out that Wesley's dead is...
Poor Francis.
It's the scariest shit ever. Like, it's just like immediate. Like, it's really full on. I found that quite confronting.
Yeah, and I love Owsley going like, I don't think you should be beating your men. I think they call that loyalty or something. You know, he was just following orders.
yeah. It's yeah, it makes you go like, man, this dude he better be a problem. Like, Fisk is on the edge right now. Yeah, poor Francis.
It's also interesting how that's right after, well, you know, it's the scene where he discovers that Wesley is dead, and it's right after when it's confirmed that Vanessa is alive. So he sort of gains one person and loses another.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's interesting. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Storytelling, huh? That just made me go, huh. That's why it feels so confronting.
Yeah, it's like some, I don't know, some scales, you know, balance imagery or something like that.
Yeah, well, it's like the charge immediately reverses, and that's why it's so scary, because it feels like there's a potential for violence because of that exchange of valence. Damn. That's really cool. I really appreciate that maneuver that you've outlined it. That's really cool. Yeah. But yeah, he really beats the stuffing out of this guy.
But he survives.
He survives, yeah. Yeah, which is something. I've got a similar note here, which is like, it. You know, this feels like all the pieces moving into place, and it's not going to end well. That's the biggest kind of sense I get from this, is like this sense of like impending dread from this whole episode, is like the finale is not going to tie things into a neat bow. It's going to be messy. And I like that they're able to kind of lay a stake in the ground and be like, it doesn't matter what the outcome is, no one is getting out of here unscathed, you know, morally and physically, right? Like there is, it's kind of like what Claire says the previous episode, like, you know, this is gonna get bloody, and the way this episode runs through it makes me go, oh yeah, this isn't whatever the resolution is going to be, and I already know that, right? But like it's not going to end well for everybody. Some, like, people are going to get hurt. It's not going to be good, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, there's like this messy kind of atmosphere to it. It's like, yeah.
It's everything's all over the shop, but it feels like it should. It's hard to explain, but it feels like chaos that makes sense, in that jigsaw puzzle piece kind of way. Whereas I think for other shows, they can just feel messy and all over the place, but this doesn't. Yeah, like the only other thing I have for this episode really is the kind of the Gao stuff and the revelation of like who poisoned Vanessa. So do you have anything else before we talk about, like, I guess like those two kind of closing beats?
There's a line where, I mean, you know, there's that whole bit where Karen and Matt have a moment when sort of Matt, you know, opens up and shows some vulnerability, which is interesting. I love at the beginning of that scene, Matt asks her, "What's wrong?" And then she says, "Oh, didn't you hear? The world fell apart." I really like that line. It could mean a bunch of different things. Like, obviously, you know, her world fell apart. You know, she just murdered someone. Her two closest friends are bickering. But also, like, the world kind of literally did fall apart, as in, like, the Battle of New York. Mm-hmm. We get another reference to that in this episode at the end as well, so which makes me kind of think, like, that maybe that is a deliberate call to that. Yeah, I don't know, it's an evocative line.
Yeah, it calls upon the idea that they are living... This story has you talk a lot about the fact, like, the kind of weighty, kind of religious epic tone to it. I think the other part of it is it has a bit of the tonality of like a Dying Earth sci-fi story in some sense. And I mean that purely at like a tonal and thematic level, where it feels like everything is winding down in a big kind of, when I say that, I mean like in a big way. Like, I don't mean in like a plot way. I mean, like, it feels like the universe is winding down, and, you know, like the world is in... Hell's Kitchen is in ruin, and this feels like the last kind of bastion of people trying to fight for like what remains. This feels like the scraps of what remains, and it isn't, right? We know that because of how time works. We've seen where these stories go, and we understand what's happening in the Marvel universe, but it has that tonality, which I think is really impressive.
It's like those Doctor Who episodes where they travel to like the end of time.
The end of time, yeah. That's maybe why I really find the Defenders frustrating, is it loses that tonality in a way that, like, Jessica Jones is able to maintain it, Luke Cage is able to maintain it, and then, like, the Defenders just can't hold all of those cards in its hand. I think in no small part because of how Iron Fist ends up playing out. But yeah, it is my favorite part about Daredevil as a show, is that sense of like coming dread, or not even coming dread, but like the dread has already been visited, and this is what we're dealing with afterwards in some sense.
Yeah, it's like super like desperate.
Yeah, that's a good word.
Yeah.
There's a I'm not quite sure that the way to describe where it ends up going, but what it ends up feeling like is, because we're so focused on Matt and Karen as two of the characters so far, they're both people that like just cannot find a way out of the situation they're in, and like the people they are and their nature. And like Nork and Fisk and you know, Nork and Foggy, really, as much as he has some pretty sort of flat characterization at times, it is this like desperation to change, and the unpleasant truth always persisting, which is like, yeah, you can't really change that much. Like, you can try, but you're ultimately doomed to your fate, and to who you are. And that's kind of Matt's job here, is to accept that he, like you said in the previous conversation about the previous episode, like, his job is to accept that those aren't... He can be the devil, and that can drive him to do the right thing. And this really feels like people dealing with... Yeah. It feels like end times, and that's a really impressive way to ramp up to your finale, I feel.
Yeah. I wish every story hit the lowest lows that it could possibly could, like this story. Yeah, it's great.
I mean, the only way that you get that is by earning is by making the losses feel like they're earned, right? Like, the reason it feels like this is because it feels like Wesley's death is huge. It feels like Ben's death is huge. They really earn those punches when they land. And when they land, you go, both sides are in trouble here. Like, no one is in a good position. It's really going to it's going to get scrappy. And that's ultimately, like, what Matt and this story is about, is, like, it is about that scrappy, unclean kind of, battling Jack, getting up and just, like, getting the shit kicked out of him again and again. It's sort of thematically doing that as well with the way that it moves these pieces.
Yeah. I also like this is another thing in retrospect, but I like how this is sort of the start of Ellison's arc, the editor at the newspaper, because he fires Ben because for many reasons. Ben sort of insults him and asks how much he's getting paid.
Open insubordination. Yeah, it's a lot.
But I mean, because the last thing that the last interaction Ben has with Ellison is that Ben is trying to get this important story published to bring this dangerous person down that's going to save lives. Ellison doesn't want anything to do with it, and then Ben dies from that person that he was trying to expose and get put away. And then in the coming seasons after this, Ellison changes. He tries to make amends by being an idealist, and sort of adopting, taking more seriously the drive and philosophy that Ben had. So I think that's pretty cool.
I mean, what a way to, like, find out that you're wrong about the world as well. To get, like, one of your oldest and best friends killed.
Yeah.
That's a real... I know. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's got to be, like, really devastating. And it's got, that would for sure incite a big fundamental change in you as a person. Yeah. Maybe
that's why I think... I've been trying to think about this as we've been sort of starting this experience and this journey. It's like, I'm trying to think about why Daredevil stuck with me in such a significant, big way. And I think it's because when people change, it's because of these, like, yes, it's about that big thing that happens for him. But also, it's not that one, it's not the death of Ben that changes his worldview. It's every conversation they've had up until that point, where he's been pushing back a little bit too much and keeping himself a little bit safe. And it's the incremental way in which people put themselves in these devastating positions that makes it feel so real when there are consequences. And I think it's to your point that you keep talking about, which is, like, we get to see the process of how someone gets there, the process of how someone keeps their friend penned in, trying to protect them, and is really doing it for a different reason, and then the outcome lands, and it's huge, and it feels earned.
Yeah, in a way, those, like, if you're Ellison, like, looking back, those little incremental, consistent moments over, like, a span of time, it's more devastating than the actual big event, because you have this realization that you were in the wrong for, like, a long period of time, and you had this negative effect on someone else for a long period of time. And it's kind of, I feel like that would certainly, amplify the guilt a lot.
Yeah, it's a very specific sort of, it's a very, like, kind of human way of understanding drama, I think, as well. Is that people are, like, a series of constituent decisions that aren't coherent. People aren't inherently coherent. Like, they have contradiction, and they have, like, incrementalized changes that are not visible to them or the people around them until they come to a crescendo, and then it's like, oh, if only I'd known. You know, I mean, go to therapy, I guess, is like the lesson there, but it's one of those, like, I just think it's a real masterstroke of when we get to like season 2 and the outcomes of this season, it feels like they take everything. I don't want to say this and be insulting like other shows, but they take all of the stuff that happens this season very seriously for the characters that it affects. And you don't always see that. Sometimes it's like, oh, there's a new conflict, we need to move on. And that's fine, you can do that. I mean, Mad Men is a masterclass in this, where an entire season is built on a particular conflict. And you cut to next season and no one's thinking about it anymore because they moved on.
Okay.
It's interesting. I mean, that's because like that show is about, and the same with Daredevil, it's about how things happen, not necessarily what happened. And Daredevil manages to have it both ways, which is honestly pretty damn impressive. Like, that's why we keep talking about this as like being such a good show, is it manages to be about how things happened, but then also it ensures that what happened matters to how things will happen. And that's tricky indeed. That's a real fine line to walk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I imagine it's a lot of fun to write as well.
I mean, you can feel
to
that,
have
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. You can feel someone sitting down and being like, oh, what's Lantum going to say today? Like, it has a real joy to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. Okay, I want to quickly talk about... I want to clarify my understanding here, because I'm not sure if I misinterpreted or not, but... So we get Matt going in to break up Gal's operation. She knocks him right on his ass with this little kung fu move that... yeah. It's one of those, like, yeah, I guess. At least there weren't sparks or anything, you know what I'm saying?
It comes out of nowhere and then she fades into nowhere. She just fucks off from the show. She says, "All right, see ya."
She's like,
it's
I'm
so
outie.
It's so weird.
It's bizarre.
Yeah.
But am I correct in understanding that it was that Gal made Leland poison Vanessa? Or they were in cahoots about it?
Yeah. They conspired together because they wanted to get rid of Vanessa so that Wilson would have more like focus.
Yeah, he was getting distracted.
Yeah.
That's cold, man. That's cold as hell.
Yeah.
There's some bad dudes. I can't remember how it happens, but I bet Leland gets his comeuppance. I don't know why. I can't remember how it happens, but I bet something bad.
Oh, mate, just you wait till the next step.
Because talk about like everyone else in the show is a real piece of work, but Leland has a special place in my heart for guys that suck.
Yeah, he does suck, doesn't he? And he plays it so well too. Like, yeah, he sets it up in a way where you don't suspect him at all, because you know he kind of hams it up sometimes, you know, when he's like, "Oh, I was holding a glass. Should I get checked out?"
He positions himself as a victim in every scenario throughout the entire show.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what makes him. He's a little weasel guy, isn't he? He's a little weasel guy. I mean, Owsley is the, you know, from the comics, but it's
And there's this detail I like when he's reporting back to Wesley after he's spoken to Gal, and he says, "Yeah, her translator kept looking at me funny." Because obviously he's like, this fucking guy, like, it was obviously you, cunt, like, what are you talking about?
It's so good. Yeah. I adore it. I think as far as like building these characters up for everything to shit hit the fan, just chef's kiss. I gotta be honest with you, Pat, I don't remember a lot about how the show ends this season specifically. So I'm really excited to re-experience that.
Mate, it's such a cool finale. It's such like a, you know, speaking of like puzzle pieces falling into place, everything falls into perfect place. And then some more shit happens, and it's so good.
Yeah. I mean, I'm so excited to talk about it. So that'll be next episode. That is going to be episode 6 of our show, and we're going to be covering episode 13 of Daredevil, which is just called Daredevil, poetically. I'm very excited. So we'll be covering that, and then you'll hear the bonus episode, the crossover we recorded with Mitchie. Take a little break, and then season 2, baby. We're doing it.
Woo!
This show is so good, man. Like, I know I loved it. I know I love it, and I know I can do it, but like, holy crap! Like, it just absolutely stunning first season of TV.
Yeah. I think this is maybe the 6th time I'm watching this show. Like, so yeah, it's great.
It's high praise.
Season 2 is, after some careful consideration, I think season 2 is the best season.
Interesting, because
Hot take.
Because none of the
probably.
critics like it.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I haven't watched
yeah.
it since it came out.
What? For real?
So, well, yeah. So what happened is, I've told you the story of how I watched Daredevil the first time, right? Which is,
remind me.
I was like incredibly sick, like a level of sick with
yeah.
gastro I haven't been in years. Where like I was trying to explain this to someone. There are like 2 days of my life that I just don't have because I literally spent it like blacking out on the bathroom floor. Like it was real bad. And I couldn't do anything for like a week afterwards. And so I just lay on the sofa, and in the few hours when the medication kicked in and I felt well enough to concentrate, I'd put an episode of Daredevil on. And that was how I first watched it. It was like this like reprieve from my body breaking down, from this just like the worst gastro I've ever had. And season 2 I watched when it came out, and same with season 3, but I haven't revisited. Like I just...
Yeah. Everything we've been talking about, in regards to like the philosophy and like the cool religious themes, are just like amplified by 5-fold in the second season. It's so good.
I believe you, because I remember loving
so excited.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Critics not big fans, but we don't care what they have to say.
Usually, my metric for deciding if I should watch a show is I look at the reviews. If they're all bad, then there's a good chance it's really good.
It's true. Critics are busted. Usually
I
ask the people I trust, and I'm like, hey, would I like this?
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's another metric. You know, if David tells me, oh, Severance is some top shit, I'm like, all right, I don't question it. And I watch it, and then guess what? It's fucking amazing.
You gotta know your boys.
Yeah.
Man, so it'll be, so special. So next episode we'll be covering the finale, then it's the special, then it's season 2, then it's the Defenders, then it's Elektra, which I'm gonna force Mitchie to watch and really rattle in the fact I can make him do that. And then season 3, then your perspective.
The Punisher?
Well, I don't know. I haven't worked that far ahead into the production schedule, but we will, just given the way that time works, we will invariably cover all of the extant material. But I don't know what's the best place you think for your prospective season 4 pitch?
Yeah, because we got to cover the She-Hulk stuff.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Is that load bearing for what you're doing or not?
Yeah, it kind of does ruin it a bit.
No,
I think maybe before.
No, that's what I mean. Like, should we do it before that?
Yeah, I think we should do it before that.
Because I was thinking we could do season 3, and then we could do your perspective pitch, and then we could do She-Hulk, and then depending on where Born Again lands, we can either then cover something else in the interim, because there's plenty of Defender shit to get through.
True.
So we can cover extant material until Born Again comes out, or just see where we land time-wise.
There's another show coming out with Daredevil, isn't there, called Echo?
What?
Do you know about this?
What are you talking about?
Yeah.
What?
There's another Marvel TV series called Echo coming out, and I'm pretty sure I saw somewhere that it's gonna have Daredevil in it. I don't know, and I think it's coming out after Born Again, but I'm not too sure.
Daredevil and Echo return to Marvel courtesy of Taboo from the Black Eyed Peas. It's a comic book, Pat.
Oh, is it? Never mind.
Yeah, it is.
Wait, I think... Did we have this conversation? I don't know.
We may have done. It is technically canon, apparently, but potentially.
Okay.
Interesting. Daredevil and Echo, and it's a fun cover. Here, I'll link you the... Where are you? It looks fun.
Wait, hold on.
You talking about something different?
No. Oh, no. It definitely, Disney Plus, early 2024.
What?
Yeah. No, it is. It's a TV show that's coming out.
Disney Plus. Oh. What the fuck? Daredevil and Kingpin, the return of Marvel's Echo Disney Plus series.
Yeah.
What? A brand new series for Disney Plus focuses on Echo, who sees Alexa Cox return to the MCU as Maya Lopez. Oh!
It's that character from Hawkeye, the deaf woman.
Oh. Returns to her hometown, but her ruthless behavior in New York City catches up with her, and she must face her past, reconnect with her Native American roots, and embrace the meaning of family and community. Righto.
I guess that's why Kingpin was set up in Hawkeye.
Sure. I
Yeah,
don't know
I
if that's how I would have done it, but that's fine.
That was a strange show.
Very weird. Okay, sure. Well, that's fun. But we'll cover it all eventually. You know, time will tell. But for now, next episode 13, finale of season 1. Very excited.
Woo!
Patrick, where can people find you on the internet?
People can find me on YouTube, Spotify, SoundCloud, iTunes, and Stitcher. Our podcast is called A Method to the Madness, or AMTTM for short. We have a website, amttm.com. You can find all the links to our socials and platforms there. Me and Mitchie just did a Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul moral alignment chart. That was a lot of fun.
It's so fun. Well, that's like one of my favorite things you guys have ever done. But for those who don't understand why that's interesting, Mitchie is very literal. Patrick is very not. And it's the funniest. It's Pat being like, oh, but have you thought about it? And Mitchie being like, no, they're evil. It's so funny. It's really entertaining. You should definitely check it out.
Yeah.
I mean, that'll have been out for like 3 months by the time this comes out. But you should still check it out.
True. Sure, we might have a part 2 out by then.
That's true. Because there's a bunch of other characters. Yeah. Definitely do that. Obviously, that'll all be linked in the show notes. If you like what we do, you can support us at ZeroIndent.com, where you can find our publication. If you want to support us directly, I was going to say fiscally, and then I was going to say monetarily, and then I started saying them both at the same time. And I almost said funetarily, which is not right. I've been talking for 6 hours today. You can find us at patreon.com/ZeroIndent. Chuck in $1 or an amount you wouldn't miss. It really does help. And you can get access to, by the time you're hearing this, probably most of season 2 because of how time works. So go ahead and do that. You can support us and get early access to these shows. If you're listening on Patreon, you're probably listening a good 4 months earlier than everyone else. So there you go. Otherwise, you can find everything else we do at youtube.com/ZeroIndent. And that's all she wrote for this episode. Thank you so much for watching or listening. Wherever you consume this, on your podcast catcher of choice or on your website of choice, please consider giving us a rating or a review or a comment. It helps more people find what we do. And also, if you have something interesting to say, we might read it out at the end if we think it will contribute to the conversation. We appreciate it. And we'll catch you guys next time for the finale of Season 1, where we'll be talking about Daredevil. And we're finally going to get the suit, Pat. He's going to put it on.
Yes.
He's going to put it on with the horns. We all love to see.
That's what I watch comic book TV shows for, is the suits.
I want to see the steams, as we say in the business. Yeah, big steam energy. Did we have an outro for this? I don't remember if we did. I don't think I told you, but me and Darth and Rye did like a 4-hour stream this morning.
Yeah.
So today, of a day of my life, I will have spent 6 hours on camera talking about media.
What are you talking about?
We've been doing a weekly live stream with covering like The Mandalorian, like reviewing each episode. And this week's was really interesting because this kid in the comments had posted some like popular Reddit theory about what was going to happen. And I got my punches in with like, it's the most I've ever in a live stream ever been like, well, I actually just read a book that basically proves that the way you think about media is wrong. Like, it was a really interesting conversation.
Oh, dude, it's crazy yeah, I've been reading what people are thinking about this new Mandalorian season. Like, it's fucking. It's
Still
like,
on hit.
am I living in a Rick and Morty interdimensional cable episode? Like, yeah.
We were literally saying they just have no understanding of how stories work at all. People are like,
Yeah.
you know, they're gonna, they'll definitely kill Bo-Katan and Dim will become head of the Mandalorians. And I'm like, did someone drop you as a child? What is happening? Like, I could see them, but we were saying on the stream, like, even if that happens, they just portray such a fundamental lack of understanding of stories. And if the writers did that, that would be bad. You don't want that, I promise. Like, that would be fan fiction. It's truly fascinating.
It's so strange hearing people say, I want Star Wars to be, I don't know, just like this grim, dark, like, fantasy series, and that's why Jack Black and Lizzo ruined it. It's because, like, why are you getting this kid shit in Star Wars? Like,
and then in the same breath, they're like, but also I want my favorite character to be king of his people. And you're like, oh, you can't. Those aren't contiguous. Those aren't.
Yeah.
They don't work together. Because every time they do some like grim, dark, cool stuff, I'm like, fuck yeah. Like, you know, I don't know how up to date you are, but like they go to Mandalore and there's this big barge of like cool steampunk Mandalorians, and I'm like, that's cool. And everyone's like, Star Wars is ruined. Why is there a big sail barge? And I'm like, this is what you wanted. You kept saying you wanted this.
Yeah.
Oh,
actually, because you know, since the Rebels trailer, there was this thread that's like, oh, who's gonna rewatch Rebels now that, you know, before Ahsoka? And there was this one comment that was like, yeah, you know, I really liked Rebels. There was good characters, good arcs, you know, but there was a bit too much plot armor for me at times. It made it a bit unrealistic, and it kind of took me out of it. I'm like, my guy, you are watching an animated kid show. What are you talking about?
What are you talking about? Like, what? It's fucking bizarre, man. Like, it's been a really eye-opening experience doing it week to week and having the same people come back. And like, because it's Darth's channel, they're all Star Wars fans.
Yeah, of course.
And I'm just not. And so it's been a really interesting dynamic of like me and Rybold basically being like, hey, this is how grown-ups talk about stuff, and what you guys are doing is insane. Like, it's been a really interesting dynamic. But I got to reference The Imagined Public, which is like that Anderson book from like the 80s. Because it was one of those things of like, oh, you know, if they do this, fans will not come back for another season. And I was like, which fans? That's not how that works. And I got to be like, because I literally just finished reading it for my Sherlock book, which is now finished. And I was like, I literally just read a book about this from the 80s that like basically proves that talking in that way is going to be detrimental to like your understanding of like politic and like what reality is. And it was actually a really like good exchange with this kid to be like, yeah, here's an alternative way of thinking about stuff. But I'm just really hoping that my voice hangs in there, because all I've done today is talk. So that was all.
Every day, isn't it?
Yeah.